Thank you. Okay, well, I'm really excited to be here. I've been back to SUU a time or two since I graduated in 1998, back when we had quarters, not semesters, and we walked uphill to school, and we took covered wagons everywhere we went, right? That's the story I'm supposed to give you. So when I was at SUU, I loved my time here. 5 years well spent. I ran cross country and track and field. I was also part of the Sigma Chi fraternity. Was in the music program for a couple of years, which is why I was here for 5 years. Music does not translate to economics, in case you were wondering. Don't do that. I actually was a founding member of the ballroom dance team, of all things. What do I know about ballroom dance? At the time, I knew nothing. But this is where I'm at today. So in 1998, I got a job in banking and finance. I did that for almost a decade, learned a ton about money, managing people, working with people, and I learned a lot about myself in that process. Spent 2 years working in wealth management for a small Inc. 500 company called Ingenuity Financial, so I did that. And then I did one of the smartest things that you can do during one of the best times to start a business, 2008. I went out on my own and I decided, honey, it's time to start a consulting and coaching company. And thankfully my wife was on board with that, and she was very supportive in that process. So that's kind of a little bit of my background, where I came from, what I did here at SUU and my time here. And my intention today is to give you just a little bit of hope, inspiration, but also do that in a raw and relevant way to you. When I was younger and I had people come to speak at school for me, whether it was college, high school, elementary school, a lot of times what happened is guys would talk about, and they would give you their highlight reel. They would tell you all of their amazing successes, all of the things that did great, and then when I got out into the corporate world, I wondered, hey, where's my company unicorn and my pot of gold? Because that's kind of what I thought that was going to happen to me, and it didn't look that way. And so I want to give you a talk today that just when I think about, Tyler asked me the question, hey, what do you wish that you knew when you went to school here that you know now? And I thought about that, and I want to talk about what that looks like today. So I want to talk a little bit about self-awareness and the importance of self-awareness. And when I share my story, here's the thing. My story is not your story. So where you struggle, what you have challenges with, where your background is and where you came from isn't where I came from. But I want you to, as if you're looking at entrepreneurship and really the value of entrepreneurship, and what is great about entrepreneurs is we're always looking for different ways of doing things, and we're looking for patterns in a story that we can then use and apply to ourselves. So that's what I want to do today. So as I talk about my story, I don't want you to say, well, you know, I didn't grow up like this, or I didn't think this way, so therefore this isn't relevant to me. What I want you to do is look at, how is this relevant to me? How can I use this so that I can launch my career, whatever that may be, whether it be in entrepreneurship or business, in some way, shape, or form, in a helpful way. So when I talk about just the whole self-awareness piece, I read a book called Focus by Daniel Goleman. It really does a great job of talking about this. And I remember as someone who's an intuitive thinker in the Myers-Briggs, someone who's a competitive, someone who likes to really drive towards results, the book is called Focus, the Hidden Driver of Excellence. So as someone who wanted to tap into the hidden driver of excellence, I'm like, oh my gosh, what is it? I get through the first couple of chapters and he says it's self-awareness. And I wanted to throw the book away. I was like, are you joking me? This is the hidden driver of excellence. So now I'm like, okay, so I start a campfire in my backyard. I start playing the acoustic guitar and I meditate. Just kidding, I didn't do any of those things. But that's what I'm thinking, that's where we're going, right? This is where we're going with this topic. But what I recognized in my own self-awareness journey is that my lack of self-awareness early on in my life held me back from probably getting results much quicker, and I ended up doing things that weren't necessarily the best things for me to do in my career. So I'll give you a story of how I got there. Growing up, I didn't grow up in the most ideal childhood. My mom was a drinker, my dad, nowhere. So because of that, what I did with that is I decided, you know what? I'm screwed up. My family life is embarrassing. I don't want anyone to know how screwed up it is. So what happens when people grow up in less than ideal circumstances? They do one of two things. They either decide, that's what I'm going to do too, or they decide, I'm going to go so far the other way from that no one will ever know that was ever me or that I ever came from that. So that's what I did. Cross-country state championships. I ran cross-country and track and field down here. I don't know if I mentioned that or not, but I wanted everyone to know that I was okay. How's Brandon doing? I'm fine. I'm doing fine. Look at me. I'm doing fine. Inside, I'm dying inside. But look at me outside, I'm fine. I'm fine. Look at all the success. Look at all the great things that I'm doing. And so I used achievement as a way to keep people at bay. The problem with that is there was no vulnerability in my life. There was no vulnerability. I never asked for help. You know, the funny thing is I went to school here. Very rarely did I go to a professor and ask a professor for help. I never told them that I was struggling. I never talked to them in a meaningful way that I thought could help me in my education and my career going forward. Didn't do it. And the whole reason was because I was committed to looking good. Carol Dweck wrote a book called Mindset. And Mindset is a wonderful book. It talks about two types of mindsets that people adopt. Now, when I talk about these mindsets, it doesn't mean that you are one or the other. It means that these things show up in different areas of our life. You could have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. Those are the two different mindsets. Now, a fixed mindset is dedicated to looking good. Look at what I'm doing. I only try things that I know I'm good at. If other people are successful, I try to find ways to diminish that, or I look at other people's success and I compete against that. I've got a fixed mindset. A growth mindset says, hey, I'm open to new opportunities. I'm open to seeing what the world has for me, and guess what? That's going to mean that I'm going to look terrible before I look good. I want to give myself permission to suck at things in my life that I want to then create meaningful change with and in. Now, I didn't have a growth mindset and a fixed mindset in in different areas. I had a growth or a fixed mindset. In my own professional success, I had a fixed mindset, but actually with ballroom dancing, I had a growth mindset. I didn't care. The first time I did a ballroom dance performance was down at Dixie, halftime of the basketball game. Right in the middle of that performance, totally blanked. I looked at my partner, she had one of these looks on her face, and I was like, oh my gosh, you forgot what you were doing, now I forgot what I was doing. Half our team stood there and just let the music play because we completely forgot. It was a disaster. The ballroom director, Melissa Jukes, at the time said, you know what, the tape got ruined. And I think she just did that to be kind, because she's like, you don't want to see that for your future well-being. That tape got destroyed. So the people at Dixie were kind, because if I were them, I probably would have booed. It was horrendous. But they clapped and they were really loud and they were super nice about it. But that was a disaster. That's growth, right? That's growth. That's sucking before I can get better at that area of my life. But in a lot of areas, I had a fixed mindset. And I had a fixed mindset, and it drove scarcity. And when we make decisions out of scarcity, when we make decisions out of fear, when we make decisions out of doubt, when we make decisions out of worry, we never make powerful decisions. And when we have fixed mindsets in certain areas of our life, we don't give ourselves permission to grow and think outside the box, because we start to engage in limiting beliefs. What will my parents think? What will my classmates think? What will my teachers think? What if I fail? What if it doesn't work? What if something bad happens? But self-awareness and growth is about finding out who I am. And a podcast I like to listen to is the Joe Rogan podcast. And Joe Rogan had a guy named Sebastian Junger who wrote the book, The Perfect Storm. If any of you guys have seen that movie, Mark Wahlberg, George Clooney, fishermen, they died. Okay, there you go. There's the whole movie, right? Perfect storm, kind of depressing, but there you go. And he wrote this book, and he was on the podcast, and he said, the problem with today's society is we've tried to remove suffering and hardship from society. But the reality is that suffering and hardship is where we discover who we are and how we create value for the world. And if you think about all the amazing things that have been created and happened, a lot of times they've been created and they've happened out of suffering and hardship. But we get fearful about suffering and hardship. We get into scarcity around that. And the reason why I bring this up is, here's the thing. I told you I worked for 10 years in the corporate world, but here's what I didn't tell you. When I quit the company, one of my employees came up to me, and I'd had reasonable success in the corporate world. And I say reasonable success, and I'll tell you why. When I left the company, one of my employees came up to me and they said, "Oh my gosh, Brandon, I can't believe you're quitting. Man, you seem so dedicated." They're like, "Hey, when did you think about quitting?" And I said, 2 months. And he said, "Oh, 2 months ago you thought about quitting?" I know. When I'd been with the company for 2 months. I'd been with the company for 2 months. I thought about quitting. I thought, this isn't the job for me. I stayed for 10 years. Monday was the worst day of my life. Friday was the best day of my life in an irrational way, right? I mean, I've got the six-pack in the driver's seat or in the passenger seat. I'm driving home as fast as I can. I have an irrational excitement about what my work week looks like. And I'll tell you this right now. If you live your life where Monday is the worst day of your life and Friday is the best day of your life because of the work that you do, you are living a life that you don't need to live. You don't. And here's the thing. Lots of people live this way. We get out there because we commit to the scarcity, we commit to the fear, and we decide, you know what, I'm going to play it safe. And that's what I did. 2 months within the company, I thought, you know what, this is not my gig. It's not my deal. I stayed because I thought, you know what, if I just get promoted and grow in the responsibility, I'll be happy, right? It's the common fallacy. If I just have something, then I'll be happy. If this thing happens, then I'll be happy over here. Here's the fallacy in that. Over 10 years of getting promoted and growing with the company and doing that, all I did was grow more responsibility of things that I hated doing. Think about the fallacy in that thought process. I grew the responsibility of things that I actually didn't enjoy doing in the first place, but now I just had more responsibility of it. Now I got paid more and that's fine, but the problem was it didn't satisfy me. It was not satisfaction. Now I'm not saying that my work in the corporate world wasn't valuable and I didn't learn a lot, because I did. I learned a lot about motivation. I learned a lot about how to build teams. I learned a lot about myself, where I'm great as a leader and where I struggle as a leader. And I really worked on improving those things. I learned a lot about sales, selling myself, marketing, the confidence to do so. I learned all those things, and it was really wonderful experience in that way. But I spent 10 years doing something that I really didn't love, and the only reason I did it is because I was scared to do something else. What will people think if I leave after 2 months of a job? What will people think if I don't make this work? I'm going to be a failure. So I committed to looking good rather than committed to what was the best decision for me. And it was all out of self-awareness. So after 10 years of the corporate world, I got a call from a fellow SUU alumni, and he said, "Hey, I heard you were looking for something new. I would love it if you came here and worked with me." So I went to work for a company called Ingenuity. We were an Inc. 500 company. And he asked me a question. He said, "Hey, what are you great at?" I was like, that is a really good question. I'm like, I have no idea. I have no idea. Now, here's the thing about talents. Here's the thing about some of this is that it's hard to read the label when you're inside the bottle. So you're trying to think about, how do I show up? How do people perceive me? And you're wondering, what does that look like? And the problem with gifts, talents, and abilities is sometimes they come so natural to us, it's like breathing. And no one ever bragged about how well they breathe unless you're in yoga or meditation or something like that. Then maybe you have. But most of the time, people are like, man, I just took a breath in, took a breath out. I mean, I nailed the breathing today. I mean, it was awesome. Probably the best thing I did today. No one says that, right? But that's our talents and gifts. They come so natural to us, it is like breathing, right? We see things, we think of things that become so natural. Now, here's why we discount them. You ever seen that, right? I say, "Hey, Kai, you're really good at this." And Kai says, "Oh, you know what? I mean, lots of people are good at that. I mean, I don't know." You know, and maybe he discounts it. Now, you may not, but maybe he discounts it. And the reason why he does that, he's like, well, I mean, do people really find that valuable? It's really easy for me. And we've fallen into this fallacy that if you want to do something meaningful, you've got to do something what? Hard. It's got to be hard or it's not valuable. But your gifts don't express that way. Your gifts express in a very easy, a very natural way that you can bring value to the world. And my call to you guys is to find out what that is. And here's the thing about school, it's great. You're going to learn a ton of things that are going to be super helpful. If you don't have a parallel track where you're using some self-discovery, whether that be through mentors, feedback from your peers, feedback from your parents, your brothers and sisters, whoever, you're going to miss out on that opportunity. You're going to graduate with a degree. You're going to think about doing something, but you're going to wonder that whole time, is this really the right thing for me to do? Now, here's the thing. The only way you're going to know this is not by creating it in a vacuum. Some of you may have business ideas, work ideas. The only way you're going to know if those are good ideas is if you apply that and you try it. That's the only way you're going to know. And I would love to tell you that there's some secret magical way that you can create success in a vacuum, that then you can roll it out to the world and everything's going to be magical. But the other part of self-awareness that I think is so important in understanding who we are is a principle that Henry Ford talked about. Someone asked him years ago, they said, Henry, hey, do you worry about losing your millions, which back then was billions? And Henry Ford said, no, I don't, because if I did it once, I can do it again. The only way that you can talk like that or think like that is if you know crystal clear how you create value in the world. That's the only way. Because then I don't play to lose, I don't play not to lose, I play to win. I don't hold on to things that I shouldn't hold on to. I let go of those things that are appropriate so that I can reach that next pinnacle of success in whatever it is that looks like. And here's the thing that is always shocking, right? And the great business philosopher Mike Tyson said that everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And that's what happened to me. Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. So here's the cool thing. I used to work for an Inc. 500 company. I was the COO of this Inc. 500 company. It was so awesome. Helped the owner of that business become a New York Times bestseller with a book that he had wrote. Really great. 2008 was a disaster if you were invested in real estate, and we were all heavily invested in real estate. So I'm the COO of this company. I've got skin in the game. I've got tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in this company. In the span of about 6 months, it's all gone. So I told you I decided to start a business, but you know what? It wasn't necessarily my choice, and sometimes that's how the world works. I had thought about starting a business for years and years and years, and I got forced into that because I came home one day in November, not too short before Thanksgiving, right in the holiday season, everyone's happy. I had to look at my wife in the eye and say, hey, that company we're a part of, it's gone. You're looking at a guy that doesn't have a job, unemployed for the first time. Now I'm really scared. Now I'm really fearful about, okay, now I always had to look good. What do I say now? That was the day I had to decide, am I going to be real and really dig into real things and have real talk? Or am I going to be defined by these outcomes that happen, good or bad? I had to make a decision in that moment. So I decided, hey, 2008, terrible time to start a business, but I'm like, it's now or never. I might as well do it. Because I can do one of two things. I can be unemployed for months while I look for another C-level job, or I can start at the ground floor with a corporation and start all over again. And I was unwilling to do either one of those things. So I decided to start a business. I decided, okay, what is it that I do best? Now here's the funny thing about talking today. To just give you an idea of how clueless I was to my own gifts, my own talents, my own abilities. Someone asked me in 2008 if I would come speak for a group of people. And I said, you know what? I'm not a speaker. Not doing it. That's for other people. It's not for me. Now, I don't know that I really believe that, but I'll tell you what I did believe. Speaking requires a level of vulnerability and making yourself known if you want to be great about it that I was unwilling to participate in. I was absolutely unwilling to say, hey, this is me. This is where I've learned some things. This is where I've been challenged in some things. That requires, it's vulnerable to stand up in front of a room. As some of you who have probably done this know, you've got to have a level of vulnerability. I was unwilling to do that. I was unwilling to get real with who I was and what I had been through up to this point to share that. I didn't want to do it, so I didn't. But over time, I had really dove into my own discovery. I started asking people, hey, what is it that I do that is valuable for you? How do I create value? What do you think I'm great at? And I didn't want to say this in a way that was like, I'm fishing for compliments. It's like, hey, what do you think I'm great at, man? Right? We've been friends for a while. What am I good at, right? You know, and some of the feedback was helpful. You know, some of it's not so helpful. But, you know, some people gave me gifts where I'm like, I don't know if I can really make a business out of that. Let's skip that. That might kill me. Whatever that is, right? So I go through this process of discovery while I'm running this business. And I realize that, look, if you start a business, here's the thing. There's always resistance. Stephen Pressfield wrote a great book called The War of Art. And he talks about the resistance. And the resistance is real. So you guys are going to get excited about things. You get a degree. You go out there. The world just says, smacks you down. And then you got to be like, whoa, whoa, I thought this was a great path. I thought we were doing great things. And there's always that resistance that comes out there. So here we are 2-3 years into the business, and I'm like, man, I don't know. I don't even know. This isn't working. I'm struggling to make ends meet. The worst part is my water got shut off. And so I'm going through this, and my wife calls me and says, hey, the water's not working. And I'm like, oh, man, that's unfortunate. I'm like, I wonder why that is happening. You know, like, you know, I know why. And I'm like, you know what? We don't have any money. I had to call my dad, and I call my dad, and I say, hey, I need $140. I need to get my water turned on. My dad was like, he got quiet, and I thought, oh my gosh, here comes judgment and condemnation, right? Like, here comes shame. And my dad didn't do any of those things. He said, you know what? You never ask us for help. You calling me tells me that you need it, and I'm going to help you. So he helps me get my water turned back on, and I start interviewing for jobs. I thought, I can't make this work. I can't take care of my family. This is too stressful. I have 4 kids. We don't have water, for goodness sakes. I can't provide for basic. What am I going to do? And just right there in that moment, I get a phone call. I'm going to church. I park in the church parking lot. I get a call from a friend of mine. I thought, well, that's really weird that he's calling me. I take this phone call, and he said, hey. He's like, are you still interested in building this coaching program? Are you still working on this? And I said, yeah, I am. You know, it's going kind of slow, but yeah, I am. He's like, hey, I got 4 people I want you to work with. Hey, is it okay if I pay you like $1,000 per client to work with them over the next couple of months? And I tried to play it cool, right? I was like, well, I guess, but you know, my water just got turned on, so I was like, I was trying not to sound like super like eager about it, like yeah, you know, yeah, I'll take it, you know. But I was like, oh my gosh, and that one thing switched things for me, right? I was right here. I was out of it. I'm out. I'm done. And that one phone call from that one relationship changed things for me. And the trajectory, look, it was still rough, right? And here's the thing about success, right? You guys have seen this, right? Success, what people think it looks like, but then it's like, what it, like you've seen this graphic, that's real. That's real. Success isn't linear, it's not exponential, it's not a straight line. There's a lot of things, and this is the exciting thing I think about entrepreneurship and business in general, is it requires a lot of going back to the drawing board and figuring out what works, what doesn't, and being and really being reborn in that. And the more I dive into the self-discovery process, the more I've recognized how I create value for other people, and the more our business has done great. Now we're almost in business 10 years, and we're pretty excited about that. We've learned about, hey, we used to do one-off consulting and coaching. We started to create recurring revenue models. All these things to help flatten out. How do we flatten out that certainty? Because our business when we first started was we hunt, we kill, we eat. We hunt, we kill, we eat. We hunt, we kill, we eat. The problem with that is it's really stressful. It's like 1 month I'd make 40 grand and then 3 months I would make nothing. And I thought, okay, how do we flatten this out, right? Because the uncertainty is killing me, and it's killing my wife. My poor wife, right? Through this whole thing, she's just like, so I'm at the grocery store, like what's gonna happen today? And I'm like, oh yeah, we're good, right? Like it's totally good, like we're fine. But I didn't want to put her through that, that was tough. But going through the self-discovery process allowed me to realize, how do I create value? How do I make it work? And I started getting better at asking for help, building a team around me, and I started saying no to the things that weren't helpful and that didn't align with who I was and what my values were, which is really difficult because one time I said no to a $10,000 check. But when I did that, something shifted for me because I didn't take the money just for the money. And sometimes we'll do that. We're like, okay, the money's right in front of me, but I didn't want to step over dollars to pick up dimes. And that's what I was doing. And we have to be careful with that as business owners. I don't want to step over dollars to pick up dimes because I'm so rooted in scarcity that I think the short-term play is the right play, but it keeps me from the long-term game. And I've got to balance those two. I've got to be appropriate in balancing those two. How do I do it? And that is a challenge. That is something that we've learned. So when you think about who you are as a value creator in this world, you are valuable for who you are, not for what you do. And don't ever forget that. You are valuable for who you are, not for what you do. Some of you may go on to become accountants, but I'll tell you what, your purpose in life is not to be an accountant. Being an accountant is just one way that you express who you are and what you're great at. But that could translate into many different things, and I'll give you an example of what that looks like. For me, if someone asks me what's my purpose, I tell them, I am a person of deep curiosity. That's my purpose. Now, how does that show up? How do I express that? I do that in one-on-one coaching, asking good clients to understand where they're coming from, to get to the bottom of where are they really challenged and what's keeping them from getting to the next level. I do that in a workshop format where I ask participants to share and talk about how they are challenged and what's next for them. And we take them through a series of exercises that help them uncover blind spots and challenges in their business so that they can move forward. I do that through my podcast. I do that through writing. I do that through teaching. That is how I express that. And I can do that in a lot of different ways. But here's the thing. I don't go through the squiggly lines. I don't go through the uncertainty in my family life. I don't go through that if I don't understand who I am, how I create value, and make a commitment to that purpose. And during 2008, I saw a lot of extraordinary people lose a lot of money during that time in real estate, and it was devastating for people. And I saw the people who were committed to purpose and who understood how they created value, they got through that. Not to say that it wasn't challenging, because it was, but they got through that. The people who struggled were the people who were just looking for a paycheck. They were looking for external things to validate them. That became very tough. And in this world, we're not always going to get that external validation that we're looking for, and we've got to look for where we're at internally and how we create value. So as you're thinking about self-awareness, recognize that you're valuable for who you are, not for what you do. And this is the thing. We live in a world where it's on demand. Everyone's got requests. Everyone wants something from you. And here's the thing about purpose. No one cares about your purpose. Okay? No one cares about it. So it's not like, okay, it's not like, Dakota decides that he has his purpose, but there's this garbage that needs to be taken out. And I see Dakota taking it out. I'm like, oh, what are you doing, man? That's not your purpose. Hey, just sit back, man. Work in your purpose. I'll get it. Okay. Close one, man. Don't do that again, man. It's terrible. No one's going to do that. No one cares. If I don't fight for how I create value and who I am, no one's going to do that for me. So remember that. No one cares. So that means I've got to get good at saying no. But when we're not good at saying no, it's because we want to make people happy, which is great, right? But am I trying to make people happy or am I trying to serve? Because those aren't the same thing, right? Let's say, what is your name?
Bracken.
What is it?
Bracken.
Bracken. Let's say Bracken has a heroin problem. Okay, sorry. It had to be someone. Someone had to have a heroin problem. Okay, so Bracken has a heroin problem, and I'm worried about Bracken. And Bracken comes to me and says, hey, Brandon, a little short on cash, man. Need some help. And I say, to make Bracken happy, here you go, man. You're so happy, right? Like, more heroin, here we go. But that's not serving him. If I want to be a friend to him, I might say, hey, listen, I'm not doing it. Heroin's bad for you, man. Didn't you learn that in grade school? It's terrible for you. Don't do it.
right? So I'm going to serve him. Now that's an extreme example, but you get the idea, right? Am I trying to make people happy, or am I trying to serve? And we can say yes, but then turns into a no for someone when we don't follow through, when we do something we're not qualified to do, or that we don't have the bandwidth to do, and now people are frustrated and upset and bothered by how we've shown up. When I'm committed to my purpose and I have that self-awareness and that confidence, not to say that the confidence doesn't come, the lack of confidence doesn't come from time to time, then I can say no and I can be confident in that. Now Bradley can tell me, well, we're never going to be friends again. And I'll be sad about that because I like it. But there's also a principle that's involved there that I want to be intentional about as well. So, no one cares about your purpose. You've got to care about that. You've got to dig into that. And I wish someone would have talked to me about that and said, hey, Brandon, it's okay to not know all the answers. It's okay to not be the smartest person in the room, and by God, you shouldn't be. You should always be looking for people who are smarter than you that I can learn from and grow from. Ask good questions. If you don't understand something, dive into that. Make alliances, talk with people. Some of the most profound and productive relationships in my life came on this campus. Still today. My most productive, profound, useful relationships came right here at SUU. The problem was it took me forever to tap into that and really work in a meaningful way with people that I've known for a long time and were just awesome value creators. So think about that. And just understand that with self-awareness and why purpose is important is that even successful people have doubts, even successful people have fears. I got done doing a workshop this last weekend on building relationships, team relationships in the organization. My self-talk when I came home, that sucked. That was terrible. Everyone hated it. Who are you to speak in front of these people? You're no good, right? These are things that still come up that I have to fight, right? That monkey mind, it never goes away, right? You'll always have doubts. But when I have purpose, I can push those out and say, is that true? Is this limiting belief that's coming up, is it really true? Is it something that really holds truth in my life? So I want to tell you why this is so important to overcome this. If this marker works, it does. Here's the thing about your brain. It's stupid. Okay? And I'll tell you why it's stupid. Not because you're stupid. Okay, I said your brain is stupid. Some of you are like, well, that's offensive. Okay, you're not stupid. But our brain is stupid. Because if I tell it something, my brain has no choice but to search for evidence that that belief is true. If you tell yourself you're not smart, if you tell yourself you're not valuable, any lie that you tell yourself, your brain will look for evidence to support that that lie is true. Now that's going to shape how I behave. How I show up is going to be based on the belief and the evidence that I've supported that, yes, indeed, this is who I am. And guess what? When we show up this way, I really got high hopes for this marker. It shapes how other people behave as well. And then guess what? You were absolutely right. You were absolutely right. You nailed it, right? Once you believed, you found evidence. That shaped how you behaved. That shaped how other people behaved around you. And your limiting belief, your falsehood, became reality. And it's that easy. And we think about this all the time, right? What is having two competing theories in your head at the same time? It's cognitive dissonance. And we do it all the time, right? You hear people say, hey, money is the root of all evil. How do I get a raise? Okay? Which is it? Hey, more responsibility, but more work is too hard. Hey, I want to start a business, but what if I fail? All these things come up for us, right? And you have to choose. And your brain looks for the emotional attachment that you have to the one that you feel most strongly about.
And it will go in that direction, and it will show up that way. And it's devastating for us. And I've held on to limiting beliefs and had to work on overcoming those. And what I do is I look for, is this true? Is this really true? I said I'm not a public speaker, but then I said, what evidence do I have to support it? I've never even done it. How do I know? Now I could say after the very first time that I public spoke, see, I'm not a public speaker, right? I was right, but then I could say, well, what is the truth in that? The truth is I'm learning. I'm new. Can I get better? Is that possible? Yes, it is. Okay, great. How do I dive into that? How do I get into that? That's the power of self-awareness. And we have a war on thinking right now because we are so plugged in and connected to distractions. When was the last time we took a step back and looked at our life from a 30,000-foot viewpoint to really assess what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it? And if I can say one thing, is create the space for self-discovery to happen. It's not going to happen on its own. You've got to create the time and space to decide, when am I going to think deeply about what I'm doing at school, why I'm doing it, what I want, who I am, why is that valuable, what are the tools and resources that I need to further this journey, who are the people that I need in my life to help me get to the next level. I can't do that, right? Jim Collins talks about this in one of his books. It's either Good to Great or the one that he did with the Hansen guy. Now I can't remember the name of the book. But they talked about zooming in, zooming out, right? I need to zoom in, do the work, but I've also got to zoom out, right? And this is important in business. I've got to zoom out and look at the landscape of what's going on, because I don't want to always be in the forest, right? Sometimes I've got to step back, I got to look at the forest. What's going on? That's the same thing that's true for our lives. So the last thing I want to say is this. When we talked about principles and what's a principle that I've learned, and I'll say this. Nothing bad ever happens when we're going out there and creating value. And here's why I say that. As a springboard for self-awareness and to work with people, it sounds really easy to say, hey, create value, of course. That's obvious. Well, I did a podcast interview, and a guy asked me, he said, hey, is it your goal to live an extraordinary life? And I said, no, it's not. My goal is to create extraordinary value. Because if I create extraordinary value for others, I can feel good about whatever's showing up in my life at any given time. But when things go wrong, what do we tend to do? We start to focus inwardly. Oh my gosh, I'm doing so terrible. No one wants to work with me. No one wants to partner. No one's booking me for... We start to focus inward, right? And when we focus inward, it just perpetuates scarcity. We get into more fear, we get into more doubt. And if you get into those spaces where you have fear, where you have doubt, where you have worry, I'll just tell you, shift that focus outward and think about this one thing. Who can I create value for today? Who is it that I can create value for today? I can't control what other people do around me or all the circumstances in my life, right? We can have good processes that don't lead to good outcomes. We can have bad processes that don't lead to bad outcomes. We can't always control these things at the level that we want to, but I can control how I show up. I can control how outwardly focused I am for other people so that I'm always creating value. Always look at who you can create value for and what that looks like. I think that's so important, and we can't do that at the level that we could at the highest level if we're not self-aware, if we're not building that. And it sounds so simple, and I'll tell you what, about success. It's not about doing big things or grandiose things, right? We know these people that have these elaborate strategies, right? It's like, listen, you don't have to build the Death Star, right? We're not worried about that. Just do the little things today that then create that quantum leap later, right? We don't have to take a quantum leap to get quantum results. It's just little things done right every single day. That if you do those things and you commit to those disciplines, it's not sexy. It's not. It's not like, oh my gosh, that is so amazing. How did you ever think about that? Create value for others? I've never heard that before. No one's saying that. But it's funny how easy it is to get derailed from common sense and basic principles. Things that are fundamentals that we know to be true that just take us away from that success. So think about that as you guys move forward, whether it be in entrepreneurship, in business, in whatever shape or form, or whatever you decide to do with your life. It's just the little things that create big wins. If you guys commit to that, it'll be tremendous. So I want to thank you guys and open it up for some Q&A.
So when you mentioned talking about your purpose and things like that,
Yeah.
you mentioned, I think, a little bit about getting feedback from others.
Yeah.
How do you develop, write out, kind of develop your purpose? Does that make sense?
The thing that I did was I read the book called Unique Ability by the Strategic Coach Group. It's by Catherine Nomura, Julia Waller, Stephanie Waller. And the book has one exercise. It's a form letter that you send to 8 to 10 people that are close to you that asks you, hey, what am I great at? I did that. I took Strengths Finders 2.0, Tom Rath, if you guys have heard of that. I did a Myers-Briggs, I did a Colby. I started just doing a lot of assessments to see how do I show up and what are the patterns that emerge. Then I took those patterns and I said, okay, how do I apply these things? And it was always going into the lab, right? I go into the lab, I try something, this works, but this doesn't. Let's take this out, keep this in, let's put something else in there, right? And so it was, and here's the thing that we get bogged down on, right? We're like, okay, I'll do this when I know this. And knowledge is important, but knowledge is one of the greatest procrastinators known to man, because people say, well, I don't know enough about that, therefore I won't do it. And so they use that knowledge because it sounds reasonable, right? Well, of course, if you're ignorant, you shouldn't do that, right? And we start to play the story forward. But the reality is sometimes the only way we're going to know is if we go out and do. So it's an equal mix of trying things. And then this is the problem that I had early on in my career. I wasn't tuned into my own feelings. Never once did I ask myself, why did I have this irrational desire to just drive things into the ground Friday night? And why was I dressed in black and acting like I was going to a funeral on Monday? It never occurred to me to maybe check in with myself and ask myself, why are you showing up this way? So I think being in tune with how we feel about certain things, what gives us momentum, what is exciting to us, what are things that are drudgery. When I look, and this is no disrespect to anyone who loves accounting or is into accounting, but when I write articles or I give talks about accounting, it's like a piece of me dies inside. Okay, now I've recognized that accounting is just not my deal, right? And if it's your deal, that's totally awesome because we need you. Someone has to do my books, so I love it, right? I love all my accounts, I'll hug them, and we're all friends, right? But for me personally, it's just not for me. So I've had to recognize that, hey, I don't get joy. Like an article on management or leadership, I'll write that in 30 minutes. Accounting, that's like a 2-day, 3-day, all of a sudden it's like Mr. Holland's Opus, and I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, what happened? Like, just get the article done, right? Like, so I started looking for patterns, started asking for feedback, started to show up in different ways. Writing, I think, is a great tool. For those of you who aren't English majors, writing is a powerful tool for self-discovery, so I would do that as well. Yeah.
When you talk about being rooted in scarcity, but also not overlooking opportunity,
Yeah.
all those things come to you from different values. It's not always time or dime. Or what's like a quick order of operations, a model, or a process that you go through? Maybe like a list of things to check off to decide if you need to be rooted in scarcity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like how do I decide what to do, what not to do?
Contingency, or yeah.
Yeah.
You have a set order of process that you go through.
So there's 3 just simple things that I look at. Number 1, what are my values, business and personal? Does this fit my business and personal values? So for instance, speaking engagements. I limit the amount of speaking engagements that I do in any particular month. Why? I have 4 small children at home. I don't like to be away from them. If I have to live a life that I'm away from them. So someone may ask me to do a speaking engagement. First thing is values. If it bumps up against the family value, we're done, right? We're already done. But then I look at my objectives. Every year I set objectives. These are things that I'm trying to accomplish. Top 5 things. Does it fit an objective? And then the last thing is budget. Can I afford it? Is it in the budget? Do we have room earmarked or set aside to do this? And we may say, look, it's a good idea, but maybe it's not a good idea right now. And so those are 3 things that I look at. And then I look at, is this something that I want to be doing, right? Does this fit who I am and what I do best? And here's the hard thing about as you grow and evolve into this whole process, is sometimes you have to die to good things to do better things. So right now in my own business, I'm going through this transition where I'm seeing less clients on a one-on-one basis because it's a low leverage activity to do things that are more high leverage like speaking. I have all these speaking engagements that I turn down or that I can't handle because it's just me. So I'm like, what am I going to do with 100 more leads? I can't do anything with them. I'll cherry pick 2 of them, and then the other 98, it's like, sorry, we never talked, right? That's a terrible way to do business, but I realized I'm in that spot, so I had to hire help so I could get them to start doing that. Now, that's stuff I like doing, but it's not the best, highest serve value for where I'm at in business. So I also look at those kinds of things too. Where are we transitioning within our vision of the company? So that's a good question. Yeah.
How do you establish credibility when starting your new business, aside from just saying 9 to 10 years of experience in this field? How do you make people, really learn what we suggest doing?
Lying. I'm just kidding, I'm joking. Here's what I did to start. So here I am, I'm consulting, and I've helped run organizations, and I've had good success in the corporate world, but clients don't care about that. So I went to 3 business owners that I knew, and I said, will you let me help you for free? And in exchange for that free help, all I ask for is a testimonial, that you tell other people and let me do a case study so that I can show proof of concept. And so, part of that is just getting people to take a chance, hoping that they don't ask really in-depth questions, right? How many clients have you worked with? Oh gosh, don't ask me that. Just things like that. I hope those things didn't come up, right? Because I knew I could help people, and I also gave people a guarantee. If it doesn't work, I'll give you your money back. And those were a couple things that helped me get my foot in the door, but that's what was really hard, right, is to establish credibility. So I started doing podcasting before it was even cool. So in 2008, podcasting was one of the first things that I did. So I started podcasting in 2008, and I started blogging. I blogged on my own site, so I just did a self-hosted, I went to WordPress.org, I bought hosting from HostMonster for like $9 a month. I did simple scripts, I downloaded a web template, and I'm not a developer. I know just a little bit of code, just enough to break someone's website, really not enough to do anything helpful. And I just started kind of going through, and I built just a really rough rudimentary template that I started doing articles on, and then I would get guests, I would try to be guests on other people's shows, guest blogging, article writing. Back then, you had e-zine articles, all these types of things. I would try to get listed in directories just to drive traffic. And pretty soon we started to get traction with the podcast. I started to get some speaking engagements, and one thing led to another. I built strategic alliances with people that were in a tertiary business, something that was complementary, and I kind of helped them, build an alliance that way as well. So those were some of the things that I did to build credibility.
We are running short on time. I want to present this to Brandon. Appreciation for just coming here. That's our board